11 hash Rome's slave torture methods that'll turn your stomach mourning. Mist clings to ancient stone columns. The camera slowly moves through crumbling walls as ominous music builds. Beneath the marble glory of the Roman Empire lay a foundation built on human suffering. Behind villa walls and in underground chambers, millions of slaves endured tortures so barbaric, so systematically cruel that they would make hardened criminals weep. Dark, cramped underground chambers with chains and shackles welcome to the hidden world of Roman slavery, where human beings were treated as property, where cruelty was not just permitted but encouraged, and where torture was considered good household management. Wall paintings depicting slaves serving their masters, modern people often romanticize ancient Rome, the toga parties, the gladiators, the empire. But they forget that this civilization was built on the backs of an estimated 30% of the population who lived in absolute bondage. Marcus Crassus, a wealthy Roman, discusses slave management with his overseer Brutus. The slaves grow lazy. They whisper of rebellion. Perhaps it's time for a reminder of who holds the whip in this household. At once, Dominus, shall I prepare the usual methods? Roman law was crystal clear. Slaves were not human beings. They were instrumentum vocale, talking tools, and tools could be broken, repaired, or discarded at will. Stone chamber with various implements of torture. Let's begin our journey into Roman barbarity with the most common form of slave punishment, the flagellum, a whip designed not just to hurt, but to mutilate. This wasn't your typical whip. The flagellum featured multiple leather strands embedded with sharp metal hooks, broken glass, and jagged bone fragments. Each strike would tear chunks of flesh from the victim's back. Handled with sensitivity, focusing on the psychological impact. Please, master, I only spilled a single drop of wine. 1 drop or 1 amphora. Disobedience is disobedience. 50 lashes. The psychological torture was often worse than the physical. Slaves would be forced to count their own lashes. If they lost count, the beating would start over. But Romans considered simple whipping too merciful for serious offenses. They developed methods that would make medieval torturers take notes. A slave drops and breaks an expensive vase for slaves who broke valuable items. Romans devised the punishment of supplicium, crucifixion, within the household itself. A wooden cross set up in the villa's courtyard. Excellent wine, Marcus. Is that the slave who broke your Grecian amphora? Indeed. He'll hang there for 3 days as a lesson to the others. Pass the figs, would you? House guests would dine and socialize while slaves died in agony mere feet away. It was considered normal dinner entertainment. What's chilling about Roman slave torture is how casual it was. These weren't state executions or military punishments. This was happening in people's homes every single day. Underground slave prison with chained workers for slaves who attempted escape. Romans created the ergastulum, underground prisons where human beings were worked to death in chains. Heavy iron shackles connecting multiple slaves. Slaves would be chained together in groups, forced to sleep, eat, and work while permanently bound to each other. The chains would cut into flesh, causing infections that often proved fatal. I tried to run to the mountains. They caught me after 2 days. When I returned, they branded my forehead with fug, fugitivus, so everyone would know I was a runaway. Branding was just the beginning. Repeat offenders faced the most creative punishments Roman minds could devise. Meet the punishment of ad bestias, being fed to wild animals. But unlike the public spectacles in the Colosseum, private villa owners kept their own exotic beasts for slave punishment. You poisoned the master's food, didn't you, kitchen slave? Let the lions decide your guilt or innocence. Wealthy Romans would host dinner parties where guests could watch slaves be torn apart by lions, bears, or wild dogs. It was considered refined entertainment. Perhaps most disturbing was the Roman practice of using slaves for medical experimentation. Live vivisection, surgery on conscious patients, was perfectly legal when performed on slaves. Observe, students, how the slave's heart continues beating even when exposed to air. Note the muscle contractions as I probe different organs. Roman physicians gained anatomical knowledge by cutting open living slaves. They justified it by claiming slaves felt less pain than real humans. Slaves would be dissected alive while medical students took notes. Those who survived were often crippled for life, making them worthless and destined for abandonment. For female slaves, torture took on additional horrors. Roman law permitted masters unlimited sexual access to their property and brutal punishment for any resistance. Handled with extreme sensitivity, focusing on emotional impact, he says, if I refuse him again, he'll have me thrown to the eels in his fish pond. They strip the flesh from bones while you're still alive. The eel pool punishment was real. Wealthy Romans like Vettius Pollio would throw slaves into pools of flesh-eating Murray eels for entertainment. Pollio ordered his slave thrown to the eels for breaking a crystal cup. Emperor Augustus himself had to intervene to stop this madness. The fact that even Emperor Augustus was shocked tells us how extreme some masters had become. When you can do anything to another human being, some people will do everything. Dinner parties often featured live torture as entertainment. The punishment, called tunica molesta, involved forcing slaves to wear shirts soaked in pitch, then setting them on fire. Magnificent show, Marcus. The way the slave danced while burning, quite artistic. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I have 3 more slaves prepared for the next course. Guests would eat and drink while human torches illuminated their feast. It was considered the height of sophisticated entertainment. Massive stone quarry with hundreds of chained workers for male slaves. The copper mines and stone quarries offered their own special hell. The punishment of damnatio ad metallo, condemnation to the mines. Slaves working in dangerous conditions work faster, slaves. Those who collapse will be buried where they fall. Slaves would be worked 16 hours a day in toxic conditions. Life expectancy in the mines was measured in months, not years. Cave-ins were considered convenient ways to dispose of the weak. the most psychologically devastating punishment was reserved for trusted house slaves. Forced betrayal of fellow slaves. Gaius, you've served my family faithfully for 20 years. I'm promoting you to overseer. Your first task: select 10 slaves for crucifixion to set an example. Master, these are my friends, my family. Choose, or I'll crucify 20, starting with your wife and children. This psychological torture was perhaps the cruelest of all. They forced slaves to become complicit in their own oppression, destroying any sense of community or solidarity. The gladiatorial games themselves were often populated by slaves forced to fight each other to the death for their master's amusement. Remember, the one who survives gets an extra meal tonight. The loser feeds the lions tomorrow. Masters would bet on their own slaves like racehorses, sometimes forcing fathers to fight sons or brothers to battle each other to the death. This month's losses: 3 slaves to the mines, 2 to the beast fights, 1 to medical experimentation. Shall I purchase replacements from the Syrian market, Dominus? Syrian slaves are too expensive. Buy Germanic captives, they're stronger for heavy labor. Slaves were literally inventory bought, sold, used up, and replaced like any other commodity. Human life had become a business calculation. When we study Roman slavery, we're not just learning about ancient history. We're understanding how easily civilized societies can become complicit in systematic dehumanization. The scorpion whip, the iron maiden, the rack, the breaking wheel. Romans didn't just adopt torture methods, they perfected them, systematized them, turned them into science. These ruins once echoed with screams that no one bothered to record. The suffering of millions of slaves built the marble monuments we admire today. Roman civilization gave us law, engineering, literature, but it was built on an ocean of human suffering. We can't celebrate one without acknowledging the other. Rome's slave torture methods reveal the darkest truth about human nature. Given absolute power over others, ordinary people can become monsters. The slaves' screams have long since faded, but their suffering echoes through history as a warning. An estimated 500 million people lived in slavery during the Roman Empire's existence. Their stories deserve to be remembered.